How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 71. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on another movie discussion, another journey where we talk about a film that we just saw in theaters. I'll give you my pros and cons, my favorite scene, and then decide if it is timeless. On this week's episode, we're going to be covering John Krasinski's new film, If. Now, a lot of folks know John Krasinski as Jim from The Office, but ever since he kind of started going into the more of the director side of, films and movies and things of that nature, he started kind of making a name for himself, especially with the movies of A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place 2. So really good stuff. Ever since I watched those films, I got really excited with just John Krasinski's vision and what he kind of wanted to portray on screen. So I was super excited to hear that he's coming out with another film. This one, again, for If, is a little bit more geared towards a wider range of an audience that people can check out for this movie. Really, the premise of this one, just by looking at the trailers, it seems like it deals with imaginary friends. That's why they're kind of abbreviated as If. Basically, there's this girl named B. She is actually able to she's able to see all these different types of imaginary friends. And she's just trying to kind of help them out and go through their journey and eventually get them to meet with their kids that they used to have when they were younger. So just a very high level premise just by looking at the trailer. Let's go ahead and dive into my overall thoughts about this movie. After watching it, I had a good time with it. It's a really fun movie. It's the story is very straightforward, but it's a very sweet movie. It kind of gives me these types of, and again, I know that it was distributed by Paramount, but it gives me a lot of Disney Pixar vibes, especially with the way that they introed the main character, B. B is actually played by the actress Kaylee Fleming. She, again, is, a young 12-year-old girl in the movie. But before they actually go into her story, they kind of show what she had kind of been doing when she was a little bit younger, hanging out with her family, having fun, having a great and big imagination. And then eventually you kind of see what ends up happening, and a very tragic thing that she ends up losing her mom to cancer. And so again, that's kind of where it gives me that sort of a Disney Pixar vibe, because you have films like Up, you have films like Bambi, you have films like, all these different types of animated Disney films. They always start so tragic, but then it eventually kind of gets you so connected to the characters that it just, you just enjoy the story that much more. And so that's why I call out why it made me feel like it had like very much Disney and Pixar vibes. It gave me that kind of a sense of like, okay, it's very tragic beginning, and then eventually it kind of will climax with eventually having to understand that like, hey, obviously I can't block out the world forever. I still have to have a huge imagination and have fun. Other things that I really enjoyed was the voice acting as well. There was a huge voice cast attached to this film. Not only did you have characters like Steve Carell, Awkwafina, you also had Matt Damon, you had Vince Vaughn, you had George Clooney, you had so many different characters that were just voiced by these famous actors. So it was a lot of fun to kind of try to pick out who was the voice actor connected to this imaginary friend. So really good stuff. Other things that I can also call out is that it also reminded me of a lot of different stories that I've seen. Again, very similar, not to sound like a broken record already, but it reminded me of Toy Story in a way. Toy Story obviously revolves around, Andy and his toys and the way that he has fun with them. But then as you get to go along that story of Toy Story, you eventually get to that point where in Toy Story 3, what happens when kids grow up? They eventually let go of their toys. They don't play with them anymore, and they play with other things. And so what happens with those toys? They eventually just get placed with another kid, and they eventually just find a new life. And so I got the same kind of feeling in this one, where what happens when kids grow out of that stage of having imaginary friends? Well, they focus on other things. They go through puberty. They go through high school and all this different stuff. And their imaginary friends, well, where do they go? And so that's kind of the same kind of plot that takes place in this film. And you're kind of seeing the story of, well, what happens to these ifs when they have no kid to play with anymore, like, or to entertain, or to just help out through a tough moment in their life. What do they do? So really enjoyed how they went through that and how they're able to eventually reconnect with their former child in order to, again, help them in some type of a way throughout the story. So again, it reminds me and it gives me a lot of different types of vibes from previous movies that I've seen, but I still enjoyed it. Again, the story was very sweet. It still kind of tugs at you in different ways, especially when you think back when you were a kid and if you had imaginary friends or if you didn't, but it just kind of takes you back into that time frame of like, man, like the imagination that we had as kids. And so I think they captured it really well in this film. I want to cover some of my pros and then cover any kind of cons that I have. First pro I gotta say is I thought they really nailed the animation. This gave me, like, immediately when I thought about, okay, you're seeing these types of animated figures like this character named Blue, who is played by Steve Carell. Think of him as a huge purple monster, but he's a very sweet monster. And what's so funny is that his name is Blue, even though his entire fur is colored purple. It makes no sense, but again, that's the imagination that kids have when they're creating these types of characters. But I thought they nailed it. Whenever there was the real actors with an animated character in the same scene, everything looked legit. Like it didn't look any uncanny feeling, or it just didn't look weird. It actually meshed up really well. And there's a specific scene where Blue actually hugs Bee, and you see a complete hug. You see the animated character wrap their hands around the main actor, and it looks legit. It doesn't look like there's a lot of different types of visual effects that might look off. Now, again, I'm not an expert in visual effects, so maybe if I were to look at that scene a little bit longer, maybe there would be other things that I noticed, like, oh, okay, maybe that doesn't look real. But everything else looked really good, at least from the first viewing that I saw of this film. Now, I do want to call out that there's also another film that reminds me of having animated characters with real life actors, and that's Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That's another great film that came out, I believe, in the 90s, and it had that same kind of feeling, and they were able to pull off some crazy visual effects, and having these types of animated characters have like shadows and go through these different types of objects. It was really nuts. And again, I'm not saying that I'm trying to compare the two, but that's what it reminded me of as well. The If movie did a great job with the effects to kind of have Bee be with these other imaginary friends as she goes along the story as well. Another pro that I really enjoyed was the twist of who was Bee's if. So as you're kind of going through it, you're kind of trying to figure out, okay, well, like if she's helping her other imaginary friends, who was her imaginary friend? Because they try to allude to it. They might put little teasers as to who it might be. I'm not going to brag or anything, but I figured it out as soon as the movie was going on, probably like 20 minutes in. I had a feeling that who Bee's if was actually Ryan Reynolds' character, Cal. And so what's so funny is that as you get introduced to Cal, he's always hanging around these imaginary friends, and you're thinking, okay, how come Bee and Cal are the only humans that can actually see these imaginary friends? What gives them that ability? And then as the movie started going along, I started noticing, okay, maybe Cal is actually an imaginary friend because nobody else is able to react around him. Everybody always focuses on Bee, and nobody ever notices Ryan Reynolds' character of Cal. He's always there with her, but no other character in that film is actually able to see him. And so as soon as I started picking up on those little, teasers and those little tips that they were leaving off in the film, I immediately knew, okay, by the end of this, they're going to reveal that Cal was Bee's if. And well, at the end of the movie, they end up revealing that Bee, before she lost her mom, her imaginary friend was actually a clown named Cal. And Cal would cheer her up, she would do all these different types of stuff, and it ends up being Cal. And so I thought that was really cool. It was a great twist. I kind of told my brother after the movie, I felt like I saw those kind of pieces that they were laying out there. By the time I got to the end of the film, I had a feeling like, oh yeah, it's Cal. My brother actually did not pick up on those little tips that they were leaving off in the film. So again, I'm not humble brag, but I felt like I figured it out before the movie actually told me, but I still enjoyed the twist by the time they revealed it. All right. Third pro that I have for this film is I actually really enjoyed the concept of the ifs, in that they actually don't move on from their kid as compared to Toy Story. And again, I think that they made the really good decision to kind of maybe disassociate itself with any that has related to Toy Story in a way. But I really enjoyed that the ifs actually don't move on from their kid. They don't just go, okay, jump from one kid to another kid to another kid. Instead, they actually stick with their own kid for the rest of their lives. And they try to connect with them. They try to have their kid eventually see them again. Because again, as they grow older, as kids grow up into adults, they forget about their imaginary friends, and they need a sort of trigger in order to be able to visualize and see their imaginary friend once again. And they ended up showing off a couple of that in certain scenes as they reconnected with some of their kids or former kids, now adults, with the imaginary friends. And it was, again, really sweet, really cool touch where, again, they never leave you. Your imaginary friends will never leave you for another kid. Rather, they're always going to be there to help you out, to give you confidence, and to do something in your life to kind of pick you back up when you're at your lowest. So I thought that was a really cool touch. As for cons, Again, I don't have too many. Again, I'm not going to say it's a perfect movie. Probably the only con that I can kind of think of in regards to If is really just hoping to see more Ifs connect with their adults. They showed a lot of different types of, like almost like a montage of different Ifs connecting with their adults, but they did it in such quick succession that I actually would have preferred that maybe in the middle of the story or towards the beginning and third act and towards the end, give more time to show the If connect with their human. That way, it just shows and it has a better payoff. I just felt like it was very rushed at the end where they just kind of, okay, hey, here's this adult and here's their If, here's this adult, here's this If, and like, it felt very fast. I would have really appreciated if the story just kind of showed, hey, like here's every single If that we've shown in the movie, and here's how they're reconnecting with their human. And, I'm not saying to spend 5 to 10 minutes, but it would have been cool to show them sporadically throughout the film rather than just a quick montage at the end. All right, let's go ahead and move on to my favorite performance or my favorite character in the movie. This gets a little tricky just because these are also not only actors that are playing these roles, but also we have animated characters playing alongside these actors. And if I had to choose between the two, I'm actually going to choose an animated character called Cosmo. He was some type of like a detective, but you couldn't see his face. He always kind of had like this very dark face. You could see his eyes. He had a hat, but he looked like an inspector. And it was hilarious because every time he came out on scene, he was just always getting it in people's faces. And he just had like this very quick way of talking. I don't know if it's because I talk very quick that I just get immediately kind of attracted to these characters that talk fast and be like, hey, that seems like me. I talk that fast as well, or even faster. So I really enjoyed that Cosmo character. He was funny. He would get in Cal's face. He would get in Bee's face. He'd get in everybody's face, but he always had things to do, things to say. And he was always kind of sneaking around because, again, he was like a private investigator. And it was just freaking hilarious. I think this also feeds into my favorite moment because it also has to do with Cosmo. So anytime Cosmo would come out, he would actually just come out on screen and he would get right in people's faces and he would just try to like scare them and just try to tell them all the information that they need to know. But he did it so many times to Cal that it was just hilarious because Cal was so caught off guard every single time. And it was funny. And this movie, again, I didn't call it out in the overall thoughts, but this movie made me laugh a couple of times as well. And I was kind of surprised. I thought the story, again, I thought it was going to be geared more towards kids, but again, it's a very wide net. This is for kids and adults. And it made me laugh a lot of times. So really enjoyed that. But again, Cosmo was my favorite character. He also had my favorite moments of the movie as well. All right. Well, those are my overall thoughts, guys. Would I recommend this movie to go in theaters? My caveat would be that if you have kids, I would say definitely recommend go to theaters, check it out. It's a very sweet story. I enjoyed it. It has a couple of laughs here and there, and I think it would be enjoyed by kids and adults as well because, again, it has a good story and a good message that is trying to portray to kids about, hey, don't ever let go of your imagination. Don't let go of the fun you had. Yes, there's going to be tough moments. Maybe we lose parents. Maybe we lose family members. Maybe we lose people or lose touch with folks. But that doesn't mean that you can't stop having fun and having a great and big imagination. Again, I think this is a very much a family movie. So if you have a family, if you have kids, definitely go check it out. But if you're more, again, just no kids, just with your partner, I would just recommend you can probably wait for streaming, check it out. Unless you're a really big fan of any of the voice actors or John Krasinski himself, then feel free, go ahead and check it out. But again, my recommendation would be very much a family-oriented movie. So if you have a family, go ahead and check it out in theaters. All right, everybody. Now we've got into the last segment, which is deciding whether If is a timeless movie. Although I do have a lot of pros about this film, I do gotta say that at the moment, If is not a timeless movie for me. It was very enjoyable. I had a great time watching it. I had a lot of good laughs. And I thought, again, the message was really good. But to me, again, it just reminds me a lot of Disney films. And when I think about this movie, I think about, oh, well, I still remember how I felt after I watched Toy Story 3, where you, again, as an adult, you have to let go of your toys, but that doesn't mean that they're gone forever. They can help another kid have a good time. And so when I think about those types of messages about, again, not growing up, still having that kid at heart, I always go towards those Disney movies. But again, that's just my personal opinion. At the moment, I think this is a great first watch, but I don't think I'll watch it again. I definitely would recommend it to, again, folks that have kids that are really into watching a movie, and especially for their imagination to see all these different types of imaginary friends. It's definitely very wacky, but very fun. So again, I would still recommend it to folks to watch it, but just for me and my viewing, I probably won't watch it unless eventually I will have kids. Then I might bring this movie back into our rotation. But at the moment, it is not a timeless movie. But what about you guys? What do you think? Have you had a chance to check out If? Did you like the film? Did you laugh? Who was your favorite character? And more importantly, did you think it was timeless? All right, guys. Thank you so much for those that stayed all the way through. I appreciate you. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we cover a new film and decide whether it is timeless. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 71 of the Timeless Movie Podcast, and I'll talk to you guys next time.